Thank you to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Whether you're in need of a website, domain, or online store, make your next move with Squarespace. Have you been wondering what the best film to shoot in 2019 is? Well, even if you haven't, I'm here to answer it in the most 2019 applicable format, the tier list. So I'm taking this very seriously. As you can see, I'm dressed for the occasion. And with no hesitation, I think we should just get into this and rank all of the films from best to worst. So if you've never seen how a tier list works, you've basically got a bunch of categories. Today we've got 5, and I'm going to split up all the films I think are worth ranking into these categories. If there's any films which you think I've left out, or that I've criminally underrated or overrated, please let me know with a comment. I think it'd be great to open up a little discussion about this. It's something that's worth talking about. Maybe there's a film which I'm unaware of, which is actually really great. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So I think there's no point waiting around. We should just get in there with what is probably considered the greatest film, Kodak's Portra. It's the top dog. It's kind of the most household name, I guess, between film photographers alike. And I think it would be fair to say that the general consensus is that it is the best. So I split it up into the 3 different ISOs that you can get it. And the first, which I'm going to be rating, is Portra 400. This is God tier. This is the best film I think you can buy readily on the market. It's super reliable, it's got the best dynamic range, it's got great tones, minimal grain, and at the 400 speed, it's very flexible. You can shoot it in all kinds of conditions. And then Portra 160, as far as colours, etc. go, it's still great. It's pretty much the same thing. However, living in the UK, Portra 160 kind of only shines in the summertime. In the winter here, 160 speed is just a bit precarious to be shooting with. So just because of this, I think it's amazing. It's usually cheaper than Portra 400, but living where I do, that risk of not being able to shoot because it's too dark, that's why it sits there. And then Portra 800 is a tricky one, because in the UK, it's super expensive. Sometimes it can be twice as much as Portra 400 for a single roll. That's just something that I'm not willing to pay most of the time. I probably only shot this film maybe 3 times in my entire film career. However, the results are amazing. It looks really great. But I think personally, I'd rather shoot Portra 400 and push it one stop than pay that extra premium. So for me, I'm going to put it in good. And it's pretty much purely the price which is pushing it down. There's one other Kodak Professional film, which is a colour negative, and that's Ektachrome 100, which is a landscape film, which has slightly more dynamic range than a slide film, but the kind of saturated colours that you'd expect to get from them. So for me, it's got limited uses. I think it can look great when you use it for landscapes. Some people think you can shoot portraits with it, but they're wrong. It doesn't look good, in my opinion. So for me, there's a bit of a worry when shooting this film. If I load this in my camera, particularly if it was in 35mm, I'm out shooting some landscapes, they're going to be great. However, you never know what could happen halfway through that roll. You could bump into the most amazing portrait situation. And if I had Ektachrome in my camera, I would be gutted. And that's just like a thing I always think about. Having Portra in my camera, it doesn't matter what I'm shooting, no matter what happens. If the best photo of my entire career presented itself, it would be ripe for the job. Ektachrome, however, is limited in that sense. So I think because it's not the most flexible film, I have to be a bit harsh and put it in okay. I think when you're shooting landscapes with it, it can be amazing. However, just because it doesn't have that flexibility, to me personally, it gets pushed down quite a lot. So the final professional film from Kodak is Ektachrome 100, which is a new offering. It's a new formula of an old film, which is a slide film. So personally, I think slides are really cool, but I never gravitate towards shooting it because there's less dynamic range. However, there is nothing better than looking through a transparency. It's pretty enjoyable. It's a great satisfaction. However, I don't know if that's worth it for me. I do think that the colours from Ektachrome are unique. They're cool. It looks great. I'm into it. However, at the moment, it's quite expensive. I'm guessing because it's a new formula and they haven't ramped up production yet. So this is one of the few slide films which I've seen portraits taken on where the skin tones don't look too crazy. It kind of works with everything. I think it's a strong good It's teetering between amazing and good, in my opinion. We interrupt this video to bring an important message from our sponsor, Squarespace. Are you looking to build a new website, maybe a portfolio for your photography, or you want to start a blog, or maybe open an online store? You could do all of this with Squarespace. It's super easy to use and you can get professional results without any prior experience of building websites. And the best thing is that you could get 10% off your order if you use the code negative feedback. So what are you waiting for? Get your new website today with Squarespace. So next up we have 3 color negative films from Kodak, which are the consumer line. They're cheaper, they don't have professional in the name, they kind of have a bit less dynamic range and a bit more grain. However, I think they're all great for sticking in a point and shoot, or when you're on a budget, when you're shooting something just for fun for yourself, some personal life documentation, not like a page shoot or a portrait session. All 3 of these films are only made in 35mm, and they're all pretty affordable. So the first one I'm going to rate is Ultramax, which is a 400 speed. The others are 200. This one is the most expensive, but I'm guessing that you're paying for that kind of extra flexibility of another stop of light. I think that extra stop is worth quite a lot when you're shooting with an SLR. However, for me, this is a film which I'd always put in a point and shoot. And personally, if I'm going to shoot a point and shoot, I don't mind using flash, so that extra stop isn't necessarily always worth it. So because it is more expensive, I don't think the tones are necessarily awful. It's not the best film, but I'm just going to put it in okay. I'd rather just spend a bit less. Which brings me on to Colour Plus, which is £2.75 at the moment. This is the bargain. This is the film which I've probably bought the most for photos without a purpose, you know, just shoving it in a camera just to take photos of friends and stuff like that. This is the one. It's so cheap, it's so affordable. The colours come out really good. There's nothing wrong with it at all. It just doesn't have that ultra dynamic range that Portra has. I think a lot of the time you wouldn't necessarily even miss out on spending less. So to me, Colour Plus, ooh, that was brave. I don't think I'll regret that. You can't complain at £2.75. Then the third one's Kodak Gold. So this one, it's a bit cheaper than Ultramax, more expensive than Colour Plus. It's actually twice the price, it's £6 at the moment. However, commonly referred to, or maybe not commonly, by someone that I know, as poor man's Portra. This has really great tones. It's nice and warm. It's kind of a bit more muted. It's got a really great look. And I think it's probably sitting in amazing. You know, this is good stuff. I think the value of Colour Plus means that I'm going to reach for that most times. However, I would definitely never turn down a roll of gold. So we're now on to the ops. Fuji. They're not necessarily my ops, just Kodak's ops, you know, the competitive brand. And they have one answer to Portra at the moment. They've discontinued the others, which is Pro 400H, which is their super dynamic range, low grain, the most expensive color neg they offer. I think back in the day I probably would have said this was a kind of equal toss-up to me between Portra and Pro 400H. Depending on what scenery I'd be around would be kind of what dictated my choice. I think Pro 400H handles greens nicer than Portra does, but Portra handles kind of sandy earth tones better. However, now, I think I'd always go for Portra. There's something about Pro 400H when it's underexposed that brings out this cast, which I think is way more apparent with Fuji's films than Kodak's is. And even though I'm not ever trying to underexpose film, if it ever does happen by accident, I know that I'd rather have had Portra in my camera. So I think for that reason, it's going to sit in like the top of amazing. You know, like it's still really good. And sometimes it can be cheaper than Portra. And there's not an occasion where I'm going to be sad to shoot it. I just would favour Portra probably 10 out of 10 times at the moment. And then there's 2 slide films that they make, which are pretty popular. I guess Fuji at the moment is maybe more so known for its slide film. And they're both designed as landscape films. So they're both kind of saturated, rich, more kind of a punch than a lot of the films which are already rated. And Velvia is even more so. It's got a really pink kind of look, and sometimes, in rare occasions, it can look really good. It could accentuate a sunrise or sunset quite nicely. However, I think you can kind of always tell when a photo is taken on Velvia. Sometimes I just can't deal with it at all. I think that is most of the time. You definitely can't take portraits with this. If you do, you're a sinner. It's going in no for me. I can't think of a reason why I would choose this over Provia, the brother, I guess. The more handsome brother, in my opinion. Provia is kind of everything Velvia is, just without that cast. It's just a more natural, rich film. And I've actually seen plenty of portraits which are captured on Provia, which also look great. It is flexible. I think, without a doubt, Provia is the best slide film. The others could not exist, in my opinion. They don't need to, and I could just shoot this. And I think for that reason, it's got to go above Ektachrome. And whether it's in amazing or God, I'm not sure. Because it's hard for me, because I don't shoot it all the time. But that's just because I'm more inclined to shoot colour neg. So I think I'll leave it at the top of amazing. Then we have the two consumer grade colour neg Fuji films, which are kind of the opposition to Colour Plus and Gold. We've got Superior Extra, which is 400 speed, and Fuji Color C200, which is 200 speed. They're both also in 35mm only. And I don't ever buy these. I used to. I think the skin tones in these always come out a bit strange. There's quite a tendency for it to go a bit pinky. However, I would put it through a camera if it was all that was in the shop, or I had a loose roll of it and I didn't have anything else. It's not like it's garbage. Sometimes when someone gets film developed at like a drugstore, the colours come out a bit like funky, like a classic disposable look. And I think this film kind of has that look built in. And some people want their photos to look like that. However, for me, it's not something which I aim for. Extra has another stop of light. So I'm going to put that in the top of OK. And then Fuji Color C200 can go behind Ultramax. You know, they're both fine. They're okay. But I'm never going to reach for them when there's something else I could shoot. Then we have the wild card, Lomography. You know, Lomography is known for its plastic toy cameras, not necessarily professional grade film. However, its color negative film is amazing. It's cheap. You buy it in these packs of 3. It's probably a similar price to Gold, if not a bit cheaper. And it looks pretty much the same. The bonus is that it also comes in medium format. So if you do shoot that, this is a great option to have, because there's no other options other than Portra and Pro 400H if you want to shoot a nice color negative film. And I think because it is cheaper, it's just like there's no downside to it, you know? You might not have quite as much dynamic range, but you're not going to complain about how much grain there is or anything like that. So I'm going to rate 2 speeds of it. I think they maybe make 3, but the 400 to me can sit above 160, underneath 400H. It's not as good as 400H, you know? But that extra stop is better than Portra 160 in the UK. Oh, I feel a bit dirty doing that. I'm gonna, yeah, that sits better with me. But however, the 800 speed is so much cheaper than Portra 800. It's kind of the only option in my head if I wanted to shoot a natural 800 speed film. This, to me, is going up there. It's really good. If you haven't shot this before, you definitely should. And then we've got Cinestill. This is Kodak motion picture film, which has been repackaged and also slightly treated so that there's no remjet layer, which means it can be developed normally at a lab, which is a pretty big deal because you can't do this with normal, just cut up, hand-rolled motion picture film. However, this does cause halation to happen. You have these big glowing things from light sources when you shoot this film. which can be really distracting. You could use it as a stylized element, you could make it look really cool. However, I think I lean towards not liking it as much. But if you do shoot it with this in mind, you can kind of leave out streetlights or bright lights and neons, and you'd get really lovely tones. It has a different look to all of the other films which are currently rated on this list. And if having a unique kind of colour to your film is appealing, I think it's a really great option. So the 800 speed, I think, is good. It can sit in the top of good. I think it's a great film. You're more prone to get that halation because you're shooting it in the dark normally because it's 800 speed. The 50 speed is tricky because in the UK, I've already complained about 160. 50's way worse. Not even like a little bit. That's just so light dependent. I think in the summer, this can look amazing. Or in a point and shoot, it can be incredible. However, just because it is limited to that kind of lighting conditions, I think it's going to sit in okay for me. And then we've got an oddball from Rollei, the Chrome 200. This film, when I've seen it advertised, looks like Kodachrome. It looks incredible. The sample photos they've got for this, I don't know how they got them, because when I shot it, it looked like garbage. I don't know how to do it. They say this can also be cross-processed. They kind of market as two things, but any film can be cross-processed if you want. That doesn't really make sense to me. And I think it goes in no. It's not been good when I've shot it. And then the final colour film, which isn't expired on my list, is LomoChrome Purple, I think it's called. And I'm not even going to rate this. It's just a B-Tech Aerochrome. It tries to be Richard Moss, and it just fails. I haven't really seen many good photos taken with this film, and I don't ever intend to put it in my camera. I love the colour neg. Not into this. I'm sorry. It's going to stay in this rating area. It's in purgatory. So I think when it comes to black and white film, there's two big competitors. There's Ilford's HP5 and Kodak's Tri-X. These are the two big dogs. They're both 400 speed. They're both good. Tri-X has a history of being more popular. It was used by photojournalists forever. But living in the UK, HP5 is more available and cheaper because it's manufactured here, whereas Kodak is made in America. So to me, that's already a bias towards HP5. And I have to say, I do prefer the way it comes out. I normally get a flatter, softer image from HP5. It's not that it's lacking sharpness, but it is just more malleable. It's more of a base layer, and then you can kind of bring in the contrast that you desire. It's also really pushable. I've shot this at 3200 and it's still come out great. It's just a really solid film. In my opinion, it's the best black and white film. It's going up there. There's already 4 gods. It's maybe too many gods. Might need to think about this, but that's where it belongs in my opinion. In fact, it belongs next to Portra. It's the best of the black and white. And Tri-X, I think, is good. I've seen loads of other people's work with it, which I think is amazing. But I've had some inconsistent results with it. I think it's more tricky to develop in the style that I like. I think there's been too many times where I've had it developed and it's come back with much less shadow detail than I want. It tends to come out a bit more contrasty. And because I haven't kind of figured this out and because it's a bit more expensive, I just have to mark it down on that. And I think to me, I think this could be a bit of a divisive moment. I'm sorry if this has offended you, but HP5's the GOAT. HP5 and Tri-X also have an ugly brother, known as Delta and T-Max. These are T-grain films. It's a different situation. They're meant to be sharper. They're both more prone to having things wrong with them. If you develop them at home, you have to be a bit more careful. I just think T-grain's not for me. I don't know why I would ever pick Delta over HP5. There's just no time where that applies. So it's just going to go in okay. I'm not going to refuse to shoot it. If it's all that's in the drawer, it will go in the camera. But I'm never going to pick to buy it when HP5 is probably also more readily available. And same goes for T-Max. It might be really sharp, it might be crisp, but I don't want to shoot it. However, there is a variation of Delta, which is the 3200 speed, which is incredibly high ISO for a film. It does come out super grainy, it does come out soft, but when else can you shoot handheld on film at night without a flash? It kind of has this niche carved out. It is more expensive than some of the other black and white films, but that's because it's got its unique quirk. However, I've pushed HP5 to 3200 and it's looked as good as Delta 3200. And I think because of this, I'm going to have to put it in good. It's a good film, I have no problem using it, but I think HP5 is flexible enough to kind of just eradicate it. We've then got the two lower speed Ilfords, FP4 Plus, which is 125 ISO, which is great. It's a really sharp, kind of clinical, clean black and white. There's like no grain in this at all. And it does build like a really rich image. I think if you're shooting something maybe studio-based or a still life, this film is probably the one out of Ilford's lineup to use. However, when you're shooting handheld, I think the extra speed of HP5 is just always going to be worth it. I think it has its place, and the place isn't something that I always use, but I have in the past had really good results with it. So it is also going to go in the good. I think it's better than Tri-X. It's going to go there, sandwiched between Ilford. And then there's Pan-F, which is a panchromatic film, which as far as I'm aware, just means it takes photos of everything the human eye sees, which I think is also all of the other black and white films. I don't really get it. It's even lower speed, it's 50 ISO. I don't know when you'd shoot this film. I've used it once before, and I don't think I'm ever going to buy it again. To me, it's a no. And then there's a weird one from Ilford, which is XP2, which is a colour negative black and white film, which is a bit of an odd situation. So the reason this exists kind of comes from photo labs. At labs, colour film is normally developed with an automated process. They've got a machine which does everything for them. However, smaller labs don't normally have a processing machine for black and white film, which means it has to be done by hand and therefore takes more time and costs more to get developed. So Ilford's answer to this was to make XP2, something which made the black and white look easy to create at places that don't have a good black and white lab. So I think in certain situations this film is amazing and it kind of answers a niche which in reality doesn't apply to me, and because of that I never shoot it. However, when I started taking photos and I had all my film developed at a drugstore, XP2 was really fun to shoot, and I do like the look of photos that it produces. However, I do think it's going to be less flexible when you then reach the darkroom if you do want to make a black and white handprint. So because of this, in my situation, it's probably going to go in okay. You know, it's just not a film that's made for my use. We then have two other black and white films made by another brand called Fomapan. So we've got the 400 and 200 ISO here. I think they also make a 100, but these are the two which I think are more interesting. So 400 is kind of like HP5 if it was more grainy and less sharp. It's cheaper, which is the upside. However, the results are just worse. And in my opinion, HP5 is pretty affordable. So there's not many times that I'd shoot this. However, in sheet film, if you're shooting large format, it's half the price as HP5, which is a big difference, and that's when I've mainly shot Fomapan. So the 400 I think is the worst of the two. I think the 400 is just okay. However, the 200, when they don't have quite as much ISO capability, that's brought back the grain a bit and it's increased the sharpness. And this film is actually really good. There's something inherently worrying to me that it's cheaper. I can't stop but feel like maybe this photo's archival purposes would last longer, or it would look a bit better if I shot it on HP5. I always just have that worry, but the results I've got out of Fomapan have been really good. So I'm going to put it like at the top of good, just breaching on to amazing. And then we have Kentmere, which is another off-brand, and I've been told before that Kentmere is like an off-brand Ilford. It's like the cuttings of HP5 or something. And I don't know how that would make sense in logistics. I don't know if that's the truth. I've only shot it maybe once or twice, and as far as I remember, it came out nice. However, as I've said, I just worry that why shoot this when you could shoot HP5? I know it's a bit cheaper, but black and white film isn't the most expensive. It's a commitment to the photo that you want to make if you save up those few extra pennies and buy HP5 instead. I just worry that the photo could be better if I took it on another film when I use something like this. And because of that, it's something that I never shoot. I think it's okay. I don't think it's going to do anything wrong. But I am just a bit worried about it. Oh no, I just realised. It's definitely worse than Delta. Oh no, it's not. And then we have a German film from Rollei, RPX 400. So this film is probably more available. Well, it's definitely more available in Germany. So you don't see this film as much in the UK. You see it on European stockists a lot. And it's really good. It comes out great. There's nothing to complain about. I mean, I think in a lot of the 400 ISO black and white films, the difference is all quite minimal. It is more expensive in the UK because it's not made here, and Ilford is. But I don't think there's anything wrong with this by any means. And also, the packaging is quite cool. It's going to get plus points for that. I think this is good. We've then got Retropan, which I think is also made by Foma, and is the worst black and white film I've ever used. It's 320 ISO, which is just weird. Why did you do that? Why didn't you make it 400? That's just strange. And it requires a special developer for it to get the best results, and that's just impractical. And it's designed to have super stylized horrible grain. And it's just too much. For me, it's a no. Then there's Pancro 400 from Berger, which is a really nice film. Again, it's panchromatic. I'm not too sure what the fuss is about that. Maybe I should have done more research, but here we are. I've really enjoyed my results from this. I think it looks really good. It's a bit more rare. You feel a bit more special when you shoot it. The results have been really good. I think it kind of sits as a nice break from when you're shooting, say, HP5 or something else, and you're like, oh, it would just be fun to try something else out and kind of break it up a bit. I think this sits in then really well. To me, it's good. It's maybe not as good as Rollei. I don't think there's anything wrong with this film. I just think the fact that it's less available and maybe a bit more expensive just brings it down a bit. I think there's nothing bad about it at all. So then we're on to some discontinued films. Fuji's Pro 160 NS, which was their alternative to Portra 160, which for some reason they discontinued. They just seem to love to do that at Fuji. And I actually really liked this film. I thought it had really, really lovely kind of pastel colours, and it was quite muted and just really pleasant. It was also always cheaper than Portra for some reason. It was great. I don't know why they got rid of it. I think to me, this is the top of amazing. I think it was better than Pro 400H. I would always reach for this if I wanted a 160 speed film, and even the first video on this channel included it. It gets an honourable mention just for that. I mean, also Portra was in it, but who knows? This is a fallen warrior now. We pay respect for the comrade by putting him at the top of amazing. Fuji's also fairly recently other discontinued, which apparently is making a comeback, is Acros 100, which is a black and white film. And this kind of sits in a similar area to FP4. It's a really nice, clean black and white film. And I've seen amazing results with this before. I haven't shot much of it myself. I think this is a good film. Probably sits around the same to me as FP4. It's really nice. And then we have the two old Portras. You might notice on Portra now, it always says new. And that's because of these two. This is Portra 400 NC and Portra 160 VC. They made all kind of variations. These are the two which I've used the most. And VC stands for vivid colour, NC stands for neutral colour. And I've used quite a lot of this in 8x10 because it always comes up on eBay for way cheaper than new Portra. And I think the colours from VC can be really nice for landscapes. It's like in between a slide film's saturation and normal Portra. Now you should have a bit more grain with this than the new Portra, but I've never looked at a photo taken on new Portra and thought there was any grain really. So that's not really a problem. I think this comes out great. As long as it's been stored well, this film is some of the best. However, that is the risk you take when you're buying second-hand, discontinued film. Someone could have had it laying in the sun for years and the photos could have come out like garbage. So I think on a good day, VC is at the top of good. It's really great most of the time. However, I've had a few occasions where skin tones just go a bit weird, but I think that could have just been the batch that I had. However, NC has been really great for me. The photos that I've taken on this film, the colours have just been so nice. I'd love if they still made this and I could do a more kind of direct comparison of how it would look perfectly stored versus normal Portra. And if this ever comes up for the right price, I'm always going to buy it because I just think it's really nice. I think I have to mark it down a bit for the fact that you can only get it like on eBay, and it's always a bit scary whether it's going to come out perfectly. I think to me, it's at the top of amazing. It's almost pushing it. If you could buy it easier, I think it would join the gods. So that's it. That's everything marked. Let me know if you've made it to the end. I don't know what you've been doing if you have, but thank you very much for watching. Let me know if there's anything else you thought I should have rated. If there's anything you disagree with, come and fight me in the comments.